Hello and welcome to Silicon Alley Podcast. Super excited you could join me today. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of Silicon Alley Podcast. Now, on the Silicon Alley Podcast, I talk to entrepreneurs and top performers to understand what it truly takes to grow and scale a business. You'll get actionable advice that you can apply in your own business and life. Now, this week, I have a special episode for you. It has officially been over a year since I left my 9-to-5 to pursue entrepreneurship full-time, and a year since Andrew and I co-founded Ostrich. As a company, we've had our ups and downs, and personally, I felt those as well. Today, I'm going to share 7 lessons from our first year in business. And as a reminder, if you've not already, subscribe and follow the Silicon Alley Podcast so you get notified when a new episode drops every Friday. You can also find the podcast on social media using @Silicon Alley Podcast. There you'll find micro content from best quotes and the best clips from the past episodes. And if you hear something you like, please be sure to share the podcast with others however you see fit. So in this episode, I'll share 7 key lessons I've learned through this first year of starting up a startup and provide concrete examples of what has worked well for me and what has not. You'll hear from some of the guests we've had along the way that embody lessons learned by Andrew and myself. So grab a pen, take notes, and grab your favorite beverage, sit back, relax. It's Silicon Alley showtime.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate. Caught in a circle saying, I'll never leave this place.
All right. So before I jump into the lessons that I've learned this first year of starting up a startup, I want to give you a brief overview for those that are unfamiliar of Ostrich and our business. So our company is called Ostrich, and we've developed a personal finance mobile application that improves users' financial well-being. Our application solves the emotional side of money, helping you build strong money habits through a game-like social experience that rewards and reinforces positive behaviors. So Ostrich's mission is to improve financial well-being globally, and the vision is to be the first place you turn to when you have a question about money. The idea for Ostrich actually came from my own personal experiences of seeing finances play a major role in my parents' divorce. That, coupled with being in technology sales, I was seeing folks with $100,000 in debt that were buying brand new cars on a big commission check, whereas other people, right after they got a big commission check, were living super, super frugally, and seeing people retire in their early 30s, a part of the FIRE movement, which is financial independence, retire early for those that aren't familiar. And so through those sort of experiences, I ended up writing a business plan several years before I linked up with Andrew when I moved to New York to officially start the business in May of 2019. So I wrote a business plan and would revisit it every now and then, come back to it, get busy with work, get busy with life, and then keep coming back to it. And it wasn't until I ended up in New York City that Andrew and I both sat down and said, all right, this is something that needs to happen. We need to make this work and figure out how to build this company. And so in May of 2019, we founded the company. I left my 9-to-5, and Andrew left his job about 7-8 months later at the start of 2020. And so up to this point, we are self-funded and preparing to launch a public beta of the application here shortly. Perfect. So now you're up to speed. Let's jump into the lessons that I learned from the first year of entrepreneurship. So one of the first lessons learned throughout this first year in business is you have to expect the unexpected. And I don't mean plan for every single possible scenario, but find comfort knowing that the unexpected is going to happen. Countless guests, it's kind of been a recurring theme on the podcast. One of the things that really stands out is this idea of uncertainty. It's one of the things that draws people to entrepreneurship. It's one of the best parts because you can have just incredible months, years building a business, making tons of money, and having a huge impact through your business. And there's other times where you could bring in nothing and you could owe a ton of money because you still have to run the company and you just didn't book any revenue. And it is what it is. And so that is something that I've really, really internalized this first year and wholeheartedly agree with from the guests that I've had on the podcast. And to highlight this point, I've got Steve Hoffman from episode number 26. He's the founder of Founderspace and is a serial entrepreneur and angel investor.
The best and worst part, it's like a yin yang, right?
Yeah.
It's like they're tied together. You cannot separate them. The best and worst part is the uncertainty. So the beauty of being an entrepreneur is you never know what will happen tomorrow. And you could wind up being incredibly rich and famous, or you could just wind up losing everything.
Yeah.
Living in a hovel and and your whole life crumbling around you. And it happens both ways. And but it also, it's that's what makes life exciting.
So one obvious example of this past year is COVID-19, right? Did anyone predict that a pandemic would bring the global economy to a halt and change the way that every person on this planet works and lives? No, of course not. Uh, it is what it is. It affected everyone. And so from an entrepreneur perspective, it changed our approach to how we're developing Ostrich and how we're building the business. For 8 months, Andrew and I had met with countless software development firms. We spoke with firms that were in India, the US, Canada, Estonia, Philippines, all across South America, Mexico. And we looked at models that were fully outsourced or hybrid models where there were some folks in the US or people that were just in the US. And we'd actually, leading up to the pandemic in February, March, we'd actually issued an RFQ. And so for those that aren't familiar, an RFQ is a request for quotation, similar to a request for proposal. Essentially, it lays out exactly what we wanted from software development firms. So that way we could get apples to apples quotes and comparisons, and would actually be able to compare them, because we've been talking at different times throughout our life cycle, and sort of the vision had changed and the scope of work had changed. So we needed one sort of milestone document in this RFQ that got everyone on the same page, and we could have everyone work off the same quotation. But, we were getting ready to sign a contract before the end of March, and then COVID-19 happened. And all of a sudden, Andrew was quarantined in the UK and I was in Queens, and understanding that the investment landscape had shifted, the economy has shut down, and we had a lot more free time on our hands stuck at home. We actually paused the decision on outsourcing development to ensure that there weren't other alternatives, as well as just kind of try to get a grasp on what the pandemic was going to do to our business from a strategic standpoint. And so luckily, before COVID-19 had actually shut down everything in the US, I met an experienced technical leader, Yotam Hadass, who was actually on a previous episode of the podcast, which I'll link to in the show notes. And I met him at an engineering panel in New York City, which was pre-pandemic in February. And we sort of connected on that during that panel, and through our conversations post-event, he actually helped us identify alternatives and weigh the options of going fully outsourced, hiring, 1 or 2 developers, or figuring out a way to build it ourselves. And so through that process, it made us get really serious about identifying other alternatives. And we actually found a no-code software development platform, which no code is exactly what it sounds like. It means that you don't write any code. So I had been trying to learn some basic JavaScript and other languages. It was going very slowly, but you don't have to write any of that. It is very visual drag and drop builders, similar to a lot of the website builders that are out there now with Squarespace and Wix, and even WordPress with some of the different things that WordPress has implemented recently. And so we identified this no-code software development platform that actually builds React Native mobile apps and web applications, again, without having to write code. And this is really powerful because the research that we done showed that we had to build a mobile application for what we're trying to accomplish in terms of being building positive money habits. We had to be on the device, the phone device, because that's where most people spend their time, and it's easy to quickly check in and build this habit of improving your finances without it being this huge burden. And when we had built an early web version of our application, it just didn't work as well as we would have liked. And we got feedback that we needed to move to this mobile version. And so React Native is this coding language that allows you to write sort of one code base. So you write code once and it works on both iOS, Apple phones, and Android phones. And previously you had to write 2 separate applications, which obviously cost twice as much money, probably more than twice as much money. And we just didn't have that. And so that's why this no code builder was so powerful, because not only did it allow us to not have to learn to code to build our application, but it actually allowed us to reach the 2 devices that we needed, which when we did research saw that actually a lot of people are shifting towards Android and our target customer base. And so we need to be on both devices. So again, I'd actually explored this no code option early on, and we didn't find anything that were easy enough to learn previously or gave us enough flexibility. So there were plenty of no code platforms out there, but they looked like they were 10, 15 years old in terms of what they could build. And so we just happened to luck out that during that time where we connected with Yotam and he helped us sort of identify what we needed to do, we took that step back and realized, you know what, let's explore this again. And I happened to stumble across the platform that we're using today. And so again, fast forward to today, despite neither Andrew nor I being engineers or being extremely technically savvy, we were tech savvy enough to build the MVP of Ostrich using this no-code builder. And so we've moved into a testing phase. We're waiting approvals from Apple and Google to move into this sort of public testing phase of our application. And when I talk about the expect the unexpected, that was something that we just envisioned happening when it came to COVID, but that actually helped us take a step back and really analyze our business and not have this huge sort of cash outlay right from the beginning to build an application that we didn't know if people were going to like or if it was going to work. So in other words, expect the unexpected. Now, the second lesson that we learned is it's critical when building a team that you have to find the right partners. And maybe it's a two-parter. One, build a team. Solopreneurs are great, but at the end of the day, it's just you. And so you need to find the right partners to help you grow and scale your business. And so when I say partners, I mean both employees, advisors, co-founders, investors, friends, whatever that is, building your partner network. And building a company starts with, one or two people coming up with an idea, agreeing to work together towards this sort of common goal. And for Ostrich, as I had mentioned, I've been playing around with a new model of finance that truly puts the consumer first for 2 years, and nothing happened because it was just me. I was, writing a business plan, I was editing, and I was doing these things. I would run it by a couple people, but it never really got anywhere. And I was just busy with a job and other responsibilities. And so what was really critical, the first step was when I moved to New York City, was reconnecting with Andrew Holliday, who's someone that I've known for over 10 years, really good friends. We work well together. We have complementary skills, and he's one of my best friends from college. And so we agreed to do this thing. And, Andrew was interested in entrepreneurship, but didn't necessarily have an idea, but was interested in finance. It was an overlap in terms of topic areas. And we've worked really well together. And so I can't emphasize enough how important finding a partner you work well with and you'll enjoy spending potentially 10 years plus grinding and building a business together. There's sort of a saying that you shouldn't go into business with friends. And while it definitely adds another layer of complexity to your relationship, I couldn't disagree more. I think finding someone who shares your vision, has complementary skills, where you also have mutual trust and you enjoy spending time with, it isn't easy. And so sometimes finding a friend that kind of fits those criteria is a great partner. So now on the flip side of this, we have also brought on the wrong partners, and it can be extremely wasteful. And so early on, we found a technical advisor who on the surface had a ton of valuable experience. He talked the talk, and it seemed like a good fit just from the know-how perspective. And, we were really, really excited after, a couple conversations. But then over the preceding months, we came to realize that in actuality, it really wasn't a good fit. This advisor was just simply had other priorities, and, we weren't one of them, and that's okay. It just wasn't a good fit. So during that time period, we still made some progress, but we also spun our wheels a lot, wasting days, weeks, waiting for responses. And some of that is on me and Andrew for the way that we sort of let that be the relationship. And so I'll take full responsibility for that. But at the end of the day, it just wasn't a good fit. And, by moving in a different direction, we've avoided a major catastrophe. And we've really, really accelerated our growth since then. So do not think that finding finding one person, whether it's an advisor, employee, investor, will be the answer to all your problems. You have to make sure they're a really good fit. Great partners make the whole stronger and accelerate your growth. A bad partner is like a small hole in your ship. It doesn't quite seem like a big deal, but you end up spending more time bailing water than actually steering the ship. And that's what happened to us. So again, build a team with the right partners. So the third lesson is make sure you have cash reserves. Even if you plan on raising money, make sure you have cash reserves. when we first started building Ostrich, Andrew and I knew that the business was not going to be able to earn money right away. In order to have a usable, monetizable product, we had to spend money actually building this technology platform. We had to spend time, money, energy building it. And so it was really important that both he and I have savings that we can live off of and also fund the business. And for us, a year has been really important. Obviously, it's taken us that long to get to where we are today. And expect the unexpected. There's going to be unexpected expenses, roadblocks. It'll probably take a lot more time than you anticipate. So being in a strong financial position personally is absolutely crucial. And now for me, that meant having the money in savings as I left my job early on in the life of the company. If you work on your business while employed, you can extend your runway and don't necessarily need a year's worth of savings to sustain you and the business. So I do, make that distinction. I left full time because that's just what I needed to do. And additionally, the type of business you're building also matters. So if you're building a business that is a service-based business or has the ability to generate revenue from day one, you're in a different position early on than where we were. So you're going to want to weigh the impact of taking money out of the business early also, even if it is able to produce revenue, versus investing it back into the business. So again, I think cash reserves are absolutely huge. And if you plan to raise money and think that will be a breeze, plan for that fundraising to take additional time. So early on, we were approached by an angel investor in the UK who, after a few weeks, actually presented us with a term sheet to invest $60,000 in the company. But, after reviewing the terms and our needs at the time, we actually passed on the deal. It's been about 18 months since we turned down that money and have been self-funding the business ever since. So if we were not in a position to self-fund the business, we might have actually been forced to take a deal that didn't have great terms, and it was with a partner that we weren't enthusiastic about. So my point is, even if someone is willing to fund your company, you don't want to be in a position where it is your only option. Give yourself flexibility and have cash reserves. To summarize this point, I've got Steve Hoffman once again. He is the founder of Founderspace and is a serial entrepreneur and investor.
Yeah, let's say you have a savings account. Like, just having savings is a lot, affords you so many opportunities. Like, literally, when I said I had no money when I did my first startup, I had saved from my previous job as a game designer, and I had enough money to live frugally for a year. But if I didn't have that money to live frugally for a year, I didn't have any money to spend on my company, but I wasn't going to starve, I couldn't have taken that risk. The same thing, like if you graduate college and you want to take a job, if you have no money in the bank, you're going to have to take whatever job's available. Like it might not be your dream job. It might not be the right job even for your career, right? But you're just going to have to settle. But that first job is so important, because that first job, you meet people, you do stuff, and it leads to the next thing, and it leads to the next thing, and it leads to the next. All these things have repercussions. If you're able to say no, 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 and then wait and find what's just right for you, that could open up a whole new opportunities that you would have never had otherwise. If you can invest in yourself and get a graduate degree that can allow you to enter into a position you otherwise wouldn't have had. Even just, if you can just even give yourself time so that you can go out there and, like when you're doing your startup at the beginning, instead of just diving into it and trying to fundraise like a lot of people do, if you can take your time and actually really get to understand the market and the customers and all of these things, and then through that process actually discover where you should go instead of just picking something and trying to do it quickly, that can make all the difference. I see for entrepreneurs, they very seldom spend enough time up front. They're usually too worried about raising capital and everything else and being a startup, quote unquote, instead of figuring something out. And so that is where I would put your money.
So the fourth lesson is about building conviction and overcoming this sort of imposter syndrome that many of us feel when we first start out doing something new. And so when I first started my first sales job at Gartner, the sales trainers threw around this word conviction. And it was sort of one of the criteria that they used to judge role plays and how you were doing and how you were selling the product. And in training, I thought that I understood what that meant. But it wasn't until I saw the impact of the product months after training that I really understood what selling with conviction meant. It's an honest belief in what you were saying and the value that your product or service provides. And so this process of building a company is the process of building conviction. And I'm stealing that from somewhere. I'm not 100% sure where, but I think it's actually from a fundraising. It was a fundraising book that the process of pitching someone is just building conviction in what you're doing. And I think it's the same thing internally when you're building a company. So when we first started Ostrich, it actually wasn't called that initially. And we had an idea of the vision for the company, but we weren't really sure how it all fit together, where we fit in the marketplace. And so over the first few months, we threw around different ideas. At one point, we were going to focus on investing in China, like all kinds of crazy stuff. We ended up weighing the inputs from others. We conducted our own research to see what resonated with others. And we also just looked at what was the problem that we really wanted to solve when we look at financial services as a whole. There's this sort of saying that you've heard really successful people talk about, that the bigger the problem you solve, the more money you can potentially make, because it's a big problem. People will pay to have big problems solved. And so what was that big thing underpinning finances that was both going to help consumers and individual people, as well as be a big problem that we could end up building this really, really large company that has a huge impact on the world? And so, over the course of this sort of process of building conviction, any time, every conversation, interaction, test that we did, piece of feedback, it helped us distill down the value of our product and service. And that's exactly what you should be doing in the early days of building your business. You'll have this idea, you'll maybe, get some feedback from folks, but it should be a process of building conviction in what you're doing and the value that you're providing. And so for Ostrich, it really hit home for us when we tested the concept of our product with about 40 folks. It was a spending challenge called Frugal Fall that we ran at the end of, in the fall of 2019. And we got to actually interact with people and see in real time the impact we were having. And I remember one person specifically talked about cutting out some subscriptions that they had been meaning to cut out and had failed to stop because they just hadn't done it. They tried the subscription canceling services and it didn't work. And it wasn't the fact that this individual didn't come to the realization that they needed to cut those subscriptions or they didn't want to. It was because of the challenge structure and community that we put around cutting unwanted expenses that led them to actually make that leap and step. And so that feedback helped us really solidify the fact that there was something to this sort of working together towards a common goal. And it really helped us build conviction into what we were building, and seeing someone actually have an impact in terms of their financial future, which is exactly what we set out to do. And so, that's one side of the coin. At the same time, we experienced plenty of failures that also helped us build conviction in which direction we should go, right? So we moved from a mobile to a web version testing because we wanted to do a custom build, and we'd been using sort of pre-built stuff that was already out there. And we saw engagement drop when we moved to this web version, and it dropped significantly. And so when we were diagnosing the problem, we learned that the email notifications and even the reminders on the other platform, it just didn't work because the convenience wasn't there on the mobile. You had to go to this other website and then log in and then do the same sort of process, but it just was so tedious and people don't always check their emails. And so we realized that one of the key things that we need is push notifications. It drastically impacted the level of engagement and the experience of our users. And so that failure showed us what was required of our application and what was not required, right? We learned something that was really important to the MVP and the success of finding product market fit. And so early on, it's easy to fall prey to this sort of imposter syndrome, right? We hadn't built anything yet. We were just sort of testing ideas, and it wasn't on stuff that was ours. And, I'd left a job, and Andrew was preparing to leave his, and people were asking us, how's it going? What are you doing? And, we were changing exactly what the product would look like as we were getting feedback. So it was really hard to articulate, what it was that we were doing. And you kind of get this imposter syndrome, and it's hard to explain, but it doesn't go away overnight. And there are moments still where I doubt myself, and it's natural when you're building something from scratch. And, if you listen to just about every successful entrepreneur, you'll hear them discuss those feelings of the ups and downs that naturally come with entrepreneurship. And so, I don't have an antidote to imposter syndrome, but I believe, based on my experience, that this process of building conviction in the value of your business is that antidote. The more you believe and gather proof points, the more your endeavor becomes real, even if you don't physically have the product or service yet. And so the fifth lesson learned is one that took me too long to really implement and get solid, but it's super, super important. And that's to show up every day by building a routine where you have accountability to others, whether it's your co-founder, whether it's to employees, advisors, partners, investors, I don't care, yourself. You've got to build a routine that works and that holds you accountable to the goals that you set forth. So entrepreneurship is lonely. In the early days, it's you and maybe, one or two other people building something that isn't obvious to outsiders, right? They don't see what you're doing day in and day out. It's not like you can point to like, hey, here's what we've done. And if you have a major breakthrough, no one knows, right? It's sort of just you or someone else. And like, you get excited. You don't have someone to share that with like you do in a large company when you hit goals, right? And if you accidentally break your prototype or something like that and have to start over, no one knows that either. If you work an 18-hour day, no one sees it. If you skip a day of work, no one knows unless you are posting on Instagram about you at the beach or something. But the point is, you're going to have great days and you're going to have really tough ones. And the important lesson is to build a routine and show up every day. And what I found most helpful is just having this really strong routine. And it's both a daily and a week within a daily sort of routine as well as a weekly routine. So every day I wake up, I journal, I read, and I do some sort of exercise, even if it's 10 minutes of stretching and that's it. And then every evening I have a reflection where I list the number of creative hours I had during the day, how I'd rank the day on a -2 to a +2 scale. And I talk about this piece specifically on the goals episode. So if you listen to that, that was the very first episode of 2020. I actually talk about this specifically in more detail. After doing that -2 to +2 listing, I list why and what I did that day, list what I'm grateful for, and my focus for the next day. And so this routine helps ensure that I both start the day on the right foot with energy, and I also reflect and prepare for tomorrow. And so in addition to this daily routine, so that's the daily component, I've also found a weekly routine. And I would say this is arguably more important because this is where the accountability piece comes in. So Andrew and I have a meeting at the start of the week to set our priorities for the week, discuss areas where we need each other's support. And then at the end of the week on Fridays, we do a deep dive into 1 or 2 key areas that were our goals for the week. And so typically that's been a product review in this stage of the life cycle. From other weeks, it's been things like diving into our financial model, reviewing our decks. And so these 2 weekly touch points allow us to track progress week over week and give each other rich feedback on key areas of the business. And so these structured meetings have also provided us this accountability. And so I know that Andrew expects to review key product updates on Friday. So I've got to be prepared for those meetings. It's my responsibility to ensure that progress has been made before the next time we sit down so that we have something to review. And so throughout quarantine, these meetings have provided us that sort of necessary face time as well, where, we'll have long meetings where we do deep dives, but also giving us the space where we have full days throughout the week to do deep work without interruptions, without a ton of meetings, without a ton of other priorities. And so building a routine has been absolutely crucial. And it wasn't something that I did a great job of early on, just trying to sort of decompress and get out of that sort of, employee mentality, but then also move into an ownership mentality of how do we really scale this business, and how do I structure my days so that they're most effective? And so to recap, I build a personal routine, build a weekly routine where you're accountable to others. And if you're a solopreneur and you don't have anyone yet, find a friend or use social media updates to help hold yourself accountable so that everyone sees when you make updates and when you don't. To highlight how important it is to build a routine that allows you to show up every day and consistently perform, I've got Jeff Wald, who's the founder of WorkMarket. He's from episode number 31.
You got no time to waste.
Ideas are cheap. The will to execute is expensive. And, every time I talk to an entrepreneur and they're like, oh, I can't really tell you what I'm working on. I'm like, that's dumb. You should tell people what you're working on. Whatever you thought about, it's not unique. Don't, stop patting yourself on the back. It's not that great an idea. Somebody else has had it. 50 other people have had it. It's the will to go and do it and persevere and push through and get it done. That's what's expensive. That's what a lot of people don't have.
You got no time.
All right. Number 6. So you need to explain what you're doing, and then you're going to need to explain it some more. And so this is a really funny one because this is one where I've failed miserably. It's a super important lesson, and I've not done a great job consistently explaining what we're building. And so early on, it wasn't clear what the platform would be, and things moved so quickly that for the longest time, my friends and family struggled, and perhaps a couple of them still do, to articulate what Ostrich does. They keep seeing Ostrich, but have no clue what it is and what it does. And this is clearly a problem, because how can anyone help promote you and your business if they don't know what it is or what you're doing, right? If I'd never seen a pogo stick before and then saw someone bouncing up and down on one, I'd have a really hard time explaining that to other people. It's this like weird pole thing that you step on and it bounces up and down, and like, I don't know, you have to be careful because it looks kind of dangerous, but it also looks fun, and you sort of understand it. But what does it do, and why would anyone bounce on a platform stick thing, right? It's weird. So it's really difficult for people to promote your business if it's not clear what you do, why you do it, and for whom it's for. To really highlight this point, I've got Sophia Sunwoo from episode number 32. She's the founder of Ascent Strategy.
Look at it from the perspective of like, look, your business right now, the way you kind of positioned it, it's really kind of boring. Like, I wouldn't pick you out of a party to like have a conversation with you. So like, how do we really amplify the attractive parts of your personality as a brand, like your business, and really ramp it up so that as soon as your audience sees you at a dinner table, they're just like, whoa, who is that person? I need to get to know them. I'm feeling the chemistry because of how they're speaking about their business and their mission. So really creating that point of attraction for me has been a huge like reoccurring story amongst my clients.
So now that we're preparing for this next phase where we're moving into a public beta and we're actually having people use the product finally, and we have a better ability to articulate what it is, that's really the key focus, is actually putting this in people's hands and giving them those who, what, and how it works so that folks actually can help share and people can help share what it is. So it's really important that you explain what you're doing over and over again. You get it because every day you're in the business. Even when you make changes, you internalize those really quick, but other people don't. So you need to make sure that you're clearly articulating what it is your product, service, business does, and make it easy for others to share. And now the last, and definitely one of the most important, is you got to get lots of feedback. Ben Sampson shares his experience a lot. He's a real big advocate and uses market research to really help get that feedback and do it early and help find product market fit. And so I'm going to play his clip really quickly because I think it's super, super important. He does a really, really good job articulating why.
Where people fall short majority of the time is they get so excited about an idea, whether it be an application or they're selling a new pair of revolutionary tennis shoes or something like that, that they forget to adjust and survey the market to see if there's an actual need. Will people actually spend money for this? And so, and the result of that, unfortunately, is that they waste months of their time, sometimes years, and sometimes tens of thousands of dollars. I've seen some really rough stories where people have invested, their life savings only to find that what they built was not even close to what people actually want or needed. Yeah. So I talk often about, surveying your audience early and often, making sure that you talk to 100 folks and survey them to make sure there's an actual need for your product. Asking yourself the hard questions. Is this a painkiller? Because painkillers are much easier to sell than enhancements, right? When it comes to just products. Is this the right timing to do this? How much is this realistically going to cost me? And challenging yourself is really hard sometimes, but it forces you to think through those challenging questions and be your own devil's advocate to make sure what you're building is actually going to be successful.
And so one of the key lessons that Ben Sampson sums up nicely is the need to constantly gather feedback. When building a business, you want to constantly hear feedback from all stakeholders. Do you like our product? Does our mission make sense? What do you think of our approach? What do you think of the problem we're solving to AIM? Would you use this? How much would you pay for it? Constant feedback ensures that you don't become biased in your decision-making and build something that has major flaws, all because you failed to get feedback early on. And so early on, we gathered feedback using existing research, analyzing competitive landscape, books, one-to-one conversations with people, surveys, focus groups, to understand where we actually fit in the marketplace and where we could actually have an impact. And so for Ostrich, we recognize that many of the personal finance apps on the market have two things in common. One, they either link to your bank accounts and tap into your secure personal data, or two, they actually hold your money and are a financial services company, whether they say so or not. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? But when we were doing our research and we were analyzing the problem with how come there's so much inequality when you look at finance and you look at Americans' understanding and knowledge, financial literacy rates, like when you look at that problem, the solutions that are out there don't solve that problem. And so we had to understand what it was that they were doing and where we fit. And so what we realized is most of the market is focused on this logical, rational decision-making process, or actually just doing the transactions, versus what people really need. And this is what we identified, is actually addressing how people make financial decisions, which is emotionally. There's a Harvard business professor that published a statistic that showed that through our subconscious mind, 95% of our spending habits, our purchasing decisions are made through our subconscious, 95%, right? That doesn't mean that we make, every decision emotionally, but what we do is we rationalize them after the fact. After we've already decided we want to get something, we say, well, I'm going to get this because, this brand's better, it's higher quality, so I'm going to spend more money on it. Or, hey, I'm going to go for the cheapest one because it doesn't matter, it's an air freshener and like they all smell great. Whatever that behavior is. And so no one was addressing this. And so the key for us to overcoming these ingrained responses, these financial decision-making processes, to focus on the actual habits that are triggered by these emotional responses. And so these emotional responses are what cause you to avoid looking at your spending, or trigger you to go buy, go online shopping because you had a really bad day and you just want to make yourself feel better, or avoid investing in your future because XYZ reason you don't make enough money to invest, or you can barely scrounge by and save. And so to ensure we were going in the right direction, we had to, organize focus groups to actually ask these questions, test our hypothesis, see if this is what was really holding people back. And it wasn't the fact that people, didn't want to have better financial lives. I haven't really heard anyone that says that they don't want to have more money or be in a better, more secure position financially. They just simply, most people didn't know where to start or got focused on other things and then felt like it was overwhelming or tough to approach. And those habits, those ingrained habits, are the ones that took over. And in time, they continue to get reinforced and they just weren't serving them financially. And so this feedback, especially through that focus group, helped spark insights into the problem that we needed to tackle, the problem that no one else in the market was addressing. And how do you actually build strong money habits that override these ingrained emotional responses and that perpetuate the status quo? And so clearly defining the problem, once we were able to use that feedback and that insights to define the problem, led us to combine research in psychology, the power of positive social accountability, to help override the existing habits and change people's financial futures for good and for the better. And so we ran tests on existing social media platforms to get real-time feedback, to sort of put these very loose challenges that we saw and see how folks were engaging, if they were enjoying it, and if they were having successes. And as we moved into actually building the application, we've leaned on one or two key people to constantly test after each feature is built. And so having those folks give both design and usability feedback has really helped me personally avoid going down a rabbit hole when you're building. Because as you build a software product, having user feedback is key because of that lens of how they're evaluating the software. While I try to think from a user's perspective, I'm also thinking from a development perspective and the business perspective about the ease of implementation, the architecture, what my skill sets are. And I've learned that limiting the perspective to that, you can create a subpar user experience through some of these testing. And so having that feedback loop is crucial to ingrain in your development process early on. And so that's why, the last piece is just feedback. It can save you from going down these rabbit holes that ultimately you don't want to go down. All right. So those are the 7 key lessons that I've learned from the first year of entrepreneurship. I've just learned a tremendous amount this first year in general. I've met some incredible people, learned new skills, made plenty of mistakes along the way, and have become even more excited about the mission and work we're doing at Ostrich. My expectations for where we'd be by the end of year 1 are vastly different from reality. And so I think before jumping into that reality, because I think it's really interesting to talk about, is my expectation versus reality, is I want to recap those lessons learned. So the first is expect the unexpected. The second is build a team with the right partners. The third is have cash reserves. The fourth is build conviction and overcoming that imposter syndrome. The fifth is develop a strong routine and accountability system. Number 6, explain what you're doing and then explain it again. And the last is get lots and lots of constant feedback from anyone and everyone. So now looking back on sort of reality of where I thought we'd be after the first year versus where we are today, it's pretty funny. So I looked back at some of the business plan and the decks from a year ago, and it was clear that I just did not conceptualize how much work and time goes into building a tech company, and not exclusively just tech, but building a company in general. We had this romantic notion that we would raise money off of our idea and the visual mock-ups that we had, sometime towards the end of 2019. In tandem, we'd go ahead and start building the application. We'd be ready to launch early 2020. And, we'd be bringing in, $1 million in revenue after our first 18 months of going live. And, clearly things have not quite played out that way. We chose not to outsource development, which slowed down our development timelines. We wasted months with a technical partner who was not a good fit. It's been a year and our app is just ready to be in the hands of users. We've brought in exactly $0 in revenue to date, and we've held off on raising capital up to this point. So the need for our application, though, has actually grown amidst the changing economic environment and turmoil caused by coronavirus. So, looking back to where we are today, they're very different. But yet my conviction and excitement for the future is stronger than ever. Planning is incredibly, incredibly important, but at the end of the day, you can't predict exactly how things will play out. So, this is just based on my experience. I recognize that everyone's journey, every entrepreneur is going to have different lessons. So I hope that you found that value in today's podcast and my experiences. That's all I got for you today. All right, that concludes today's episode of the Silicon Alley podcast. I hope that you enjoyed hearing about the 7 lessons that I've learned from this first year in business. It was a lot of fun for me to reflect and kind of share some of the pitfalls that we've had, as well as some of the successes building Ostrich. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm super, super excited about the company and the impact that we're going to have. We're building an awesome team. So if you want to learn more, go to getostrich.com. Go ahead and sign up for Ostrich there. Once the public beta is available, we'll go ahead and drop you a line, send you a link so that you can download that and give us feedback. Also, you can follow us on social media at the Ostrich app, THE Ostrich app, on all the major social media platforms. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with other people. And also let me know what you thought. Let me know which things stood out to you. If you disagree, if you agree, if I missed something, drop a line, let me know. You can also do that at the Ostrich account, or you can do it at Silicon Alley's account, which is at Silicon Alley Podcast on all the major social media platforms. Thanks so much. I'm William Glass, CEO and co-founder of Ostrich, and of course, your host of the Silicon Alley Podcast. Thanks for sitting down with me today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.
You got no time to waste, but still you hesitate.